Hi, I'm Elizabeth Curry Chandler. I'm a journalist and writer who, together with my husband, co-founded the website Goodreads, an adventure that completely took over our lives. Today, I'm editor-in-chief of Goodreads, and I'm still doing what I've always loved to do, interviewing and writing about creative and dynamic people. For this podcast, I'm talking to the world's most interesting people about what they're reading and why. Frederic Tuten, at 82 years old, has lived many lives. He was a poor kid from the Bronx in the 1930s and 40s, a young bohemian studying art in Mexico, a New York City academic and art world insider, an acclaimed novelist. Frederic Tuten came of age, though, in the mythical lost world of 1950s Greenwich Village, a world he writes about in his beautiful new memoir, My Young Life. He joined me from New York City to talk about his memoir and about the other books that have shaped his life. Frederic, you have a new memoir, My Young Life, which tells about your early years, your dreams of becoming an artist and moving to the romantic streets of Paris. It's also a story about your many love affairs and your later pursuit of a career as a writer. Why did you decide to write your memoir?
It's interesting, that question, because I never proposed to do one. I never thought I'd write a memoir. I always thought that was sort of, I don't know how to put it, cheap. I guess a silly thing to say, but too easy. I thought it was always too easy. I did this, I did that. But I came around to a very different feeling later in life, the last 10 years, I would say, because many of my wonderful, dearest friends have died. And I began to feel terrible nostalgia, missing them very, very much. Some were very famous, like Roy Lichtenstein, he's my oldest and closest friend. And my dearest friends were the older friends older than myself. But moving friendships, lovely friendships, and they're gone. And suddenly you find yourself in a strange position. You look back and there are more sort of dead people in your life, gone, ghosts, than there are people you know presently. And of course, the relationships were long-lasting, so you can't reconnect with people, new people, that way. They have no history with you. You have not with them. In any case, I started thinking a lot about my family, about my grandmother, my Sicilian grandmother, my mother, my father Rex from Savannah, Georgia. I began thinking about them a lot. And strangely enough, dreaming about them, missing their vocabulary, missing their tenderness with me. And I thought, I don't want them, and also the other people we're talking about, friends known and unknown, I don't want them to vanish. I don't want them to disappear. I have no illusions that any writer, it writes for immortality or that any work is immortal. So I have no illusion about that. I don't think famous writers of their day have vanished. No, people don't even know who they are now. But I thought, Fred, do it. Tell about them and how you lived. Make some little mark that you were here. That's it. It'll disappear like, writing in the sand when the waves come over it, but okay. But at least you've done it. I felt that imperative. I wanted to say what it was I thought about, dreamt about, lived, and how I lived with whom I lived.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of these books that you've recommended, but I have one general question first. Mm-hmm. I'd like to know why you read.
Well, I started reading, I'm 82, try to remember if you can, I'm sure you can't, that when I was a kid, there was no television. There was radio, and the radio was a wonderful thing for kids. We had all those series like The Lone Ranger, The Green Hornet, all those wonderful kids shows that I glued to them. They were all wonderfully written and beautiful narratives. But there was nothing else except books. Now, some people don't care. They have books and they don't care if they read them. But I was absorbed with them. My mother would go to the library for me when I was sick in bed, when I had rheumatic fever, and bring me books like Huckleberry Finn and Kidnapped, Robert Louis Stevenson. Magic, magic, magic. It opened up the whole world of worlds to me. You know that there are kids like myself. When my lights went out, I try to get a little flashlight so I can keep reading. Once you're in the world of the book, those kinds of books, the ones that you love so much, you never want to leave those books. They're part of your life. They are part of your life, as a family would be part of your life, as friends are part of you, as your pet cat, dog would be part of your life. So it meant the world to me, the world of the imagination, the world of characters, the world of language, the beautiful language that these books represented for me.
Yeah.
My mother also was a reader. My mother, but she read, those kinds of thrillers and romances. She read like pirate romances. I guess we would call them bodice
Bodice
terrors,
rippers.
bodice rippers. Yeah. Because she was very alone and very sad. She never married again. She never had a boyfriend again. She was waiting for my father to come back. That's all she dreamed about. So at night, she'd go to bed with a book, like Raphael Sabatini, these pirate novels and these sort of swashbuckling romances. So I was very early on, I saw that one of the places of refuge in life was books. I remember later on in life, I used to make fun of her. I said, "Why do you read these bad books, Mom? Why do you read these terrible books?" She got very upset. She said, "Leave me alone. The books I love, let me have my love for my own books."
Yeah.
That taught me a lesson, that kind of secularism, that kind of provincial idea of like there's a certain kind of book that's only the best kind of book and the rest of the books don't matter. It's a joke. You read because you love it. You can read the box top of a carton of milk and you still like it. So I think eventually, I don't know if we have talked about this, I wrote this novel called Tintin in the New World, and it combined two of my great loves, which was the Tintin books, the characters in Tintin, and my love for a novel that I grew up with, so to speak, which really has stayed with me and never has left me. I think about it. I go back to reading it every so while. It's called The Magic Mountain, a novel by Thomas Mann.
I'd love to know a little bit more about how you encountered Magic Mountain. I mean, when did you first read that book?
This is it, Elizabeth. Let me say this. When I was a kid, I guess I'm still a kid. I hope I am. When I was a kid, I thought that the best thing to do is read books you don't understand.
Yeah.
Not that you read the easy books. And so I remember slugging through the first 30, 40, 50 pages. It was so slow. It's so painfully slow, I thought. You want something quick-paced. And I don't know why I put it away. Then maybe I picked it up again. And eventually, when I got into it, I did, those books that you look at how many pages are left and you can't bear it, it's going to be end. That's how I felt about the book.
Well,
A young man coming to sanitarium to visit a cousin, supposedly just for a visit, who stays for 7 years, sick, 7 years. And in that 7 years, he's a transformed person.
I read several really interesting reviews on Goodreads about it. Do you think it's mostly about the treatment of time, or the idea that being sick grants you a certain freedom and license of behavior?
Well, that's a lot of things to say about it. It just has many levels. And one is about time. And that's when I mentioned earlier how slow it starts, how slowly it starts. People have written about this. His magic prose, even in translation, he starts you off with a kind of slowness, like if you were sort of a day seems very long to you and it's very slow, and then it starts to pick up, and by the middle of the book, it starts to pick up so quickly, and then it begins to race forward. It's like time. It's like really is like how you experience time. Sometimes a day can seem like an eternity. Sometimes a day can seem like a minute. That's how that's the great manipulation he creates in that book. He's just brilliant at it.
How did it change you, Magic Mountain? Did it change the way you think about life?
Yes, it made me think a couple of things about life. It made me think about the rational and the irrational, which I still think about. How we live and wish to live on a rational basis. And then there's something about us all that's so different from that, so moved by things that change us from a path of reason. And it's love. That was an experience of thinking about life and how we are not always choosing what we think is good for us, or that we know is good for us even, for things that excite us. And that excitement it goes against our notion of being reasonable. Well, we once in a while want to go crazy with love. I think once in a while we feel, it's like getting sick. I want to be ill enough so I don't have to go to work. I want to be crazy enough so I can live a crazy, dynamic, maybe painful time in life, but it's passionate and it's glorious. And I wish I could have it again. Years ago, just as an aside, I was very in love with a woman. And she became a character in my novel called Van Gogh's Bad Cafe. She is the character in it, in fact. Oh, she was she was extraordinary. I don't want to go into too much because she's still alive, but she was ravishing. That's all I can say.
It's a great word.
An original. Photographer. She lived in a Winnebago. She would travel around the streets and stop and make photographs and live in a Winnebago. She was just extraordinary. Why am I saying all this? Oh, yes, because eventually because eventually she left me for other known territories. I understand. but it was hard to get over it. One of my dearest friends, one day we were talking, I was still in such mourning and grief. He turned to me and he said, "Fred, don't worry. You'll meet the wrong woman again soon." I thought, I guess that's what I'm longing for, the wrong woman.
Let's talk about Nightwood by Djuna Barnes.
Djuna Barnes. It's a crazy book, a marvelous book, an exciting book, difficult book. It's about love and revenge. It's about a woman loving a woman with passionate intensity, and about revenge for the person who took her away from her. So it's a novel of complexity of love. That's one part of it. One of the things I came to realize as I got older, because when you're young, you just read for the story, I suppose. Apart from the meaning of some meanings, I should put it, of that book, which is exactly about the irrationality of our choices and the passion of our choices, is as a novelist, as a craftsperson, what extraordinary things she did. She broke, let me put it this way, if this book came to a workshop in an MFA program now, they wouldn't even give her her thesis. It's so, from their point of view, from the point of view of a well-made, well-constructed novel, arc of the novel, characters with all that stuff that you're fed day in and day out about what a novel should be and how to make a novel. Well, you'll never have a great novel if you do that. You'll never have a great novel. You'll never have a Moby Dick. You'll never have a crazy, wild, free ride. And you'll never have Djuna Barnes. Djuna Barnes, here's a rule. Show, don't tell. Basic rule.
Yeah.
Well, at a certain moment, she starts to tell the reader her feelings and why she hates the character. Think about
Amazing.
that. She's penny. She's a cheap, avaricious, horrible person who wants to steal everything from you. I mean, it just breaks into the thing. The first 30 pages or 20 pages are boring, naturalistic writing, and then it breaks away into the most lyrical, extraordinary thing. No, she's a marvel. She's a marvel. Not everyone knows about her.
And she's
fascinating.
fascinating.
Fascinating. She herself was fascinating. And one of the reasons I think I'm so wedded to the book is that I loved her biography so much. She was a child of incredible poverty, which I understand very well. She created herself no college education. I don't think she ever finished high school.
Yeah.
And she began to write to support her family. They were so poor. And she wrote newspaper pieces. She was like the original first-person narrator first-person journalist, like Tom Wolfe and those people like that. She started it. She's there before their time by 25, 30 years at least. That's when she was young. Then she went to Paris. The newspaper, she was writing for Vanity Fair, and they said, "We hear some things are going on in Paris. Come back and report it." She gets to Paris, and the first day she's there, she meets James Joyce and interviews him. I mean, she was just remarkable. Everything about it is remarkable. Her integrity, the way she wrote the kind of book that she wants to write, exactly as she wanted to write it. Very hard to get it published. Nightwood was very difficult to get published. And the only person who supported it and had the clout to publish it was T.S. Eliot, the poet. She was very beautiful. And when she lived in Greenwich Village, she was the lover of many, many people. And she was sort of indifferent to the gender. I don't know if the word is correct anymore, but you know what I mean. The more you read about her toward the end, you see how reclusive she was. Peggy Guggenheim, by the way, whose memoir I'm just crazy for, Peggy Guggenheim wrote that Djuna was so ungrateful that although she had been supporting her by paying her rent for the last 25 years or something like that, she never once thanked her.
Wow.
But she's an exciting person, a wonderful, mysterious person, the kind of person I think I sort of miss today. I mean, I can't call them eccentrics, originals.
Yeah.
And originals who stay true to their course.
Well, two questions. One is it just seems like there was a lot more freedom to be unlikable in the past, perhaps. I
That's
think
probably true.
there's more of an embrace of strange contours to your personality. And then I also just wanted to know, how did that book change you or your perspective?
Well, one thing I think I didn't think I realized it immediately, when I was too young, but I think it made me feel as I grew older and I began to read it again and again, how much freedom one is allowed if you're not frightened. That years ago, my deep friendship, my loving friendship with Roy Lichtenstein, who never talked about art history, never pontificated, but one day just casually we were talking, and he said to me, "You know, Fred, one of the things about the problem with an artist, is that when he comes to a canvas, if he's a painter, when he comes to a canvas, he or she already knows what a work of art looks like." Now, that was powerful. I thought, well, that's how we approach writing. Think about Djuna Barnes, and that's why she had such difficulty in publishing a book. She broke all the rules. But I think, for myself anyway, Melville says it. He said, I'd rather read a failed book that has ambition than a well-made book. Now, I think that's what I feel too. There's a penalty for that. The penalty is you don't have a large audience, perhaps. You don't have a great commercial success. But at least when you come out of this world, you feel you honored yourself at least. You pay tribute to the work that you love so much and other people.
Yeah. Let's also talk about Pedro Paramo by Juan Rulfo.
Juan Rulfo, Pedro Paramo, yes.
The 1955 surrealist book from Mexico about a man's quest to learn about his father. That was another book you recommended.
Juan Rulfo's book, well, let's put it this way, so I can give you the pedigree for it. Garcia Marquez said, there would be none of us, meaning him and Yolosa and all the Mexican, all the South America, we would not exist if it had not been for Juan Rulfo. His one novel, Pedro Paramo. You see, the minute you pick it up, the first page, you're entranced. I mean, you're in a trance. And he also does, it's very simple. The prose could not be more simple, but more beautifully engineered, so that the description of a sky in the most beautiful, simple language is ravishing and fresh. The characters, you don't quite understand until for a while you're in it, if they're alive or dead. Yes, he's on a quest to see his father, but then you find out his father is dead, and the place he goes to is the land of the dead. But it's as magical or real as a place of the living, and sometimes it's interchangeable. It's just a magic book. I'm going back to read it again and again over a few years. I can't tell you what. There are just Look, there are people we know we love very much, very much, very much, and we can't do without, and we have to see them once in a while. That's how I feel about this book. That's what the great books do. They make you live differently, and you live through them differently. I can't live without books. I don't want to live without books, in fact. I don't think there's a world for me without books. I mean, you can live, you can eat, drink, make love, fine, that's great. But there's a moment you have to go into your own privacy, your own quiet world with that book that you become partners with.
Well, Frederic, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me. And I just love how much, love that you infuse in your work, and your memoir is really about love, and it's been fun talking to you.
Well, listen, let me say my real deep thanks to you for letting me do this and being so generous and permitting me to blabber on. And once I get started on my loves, I guess it's hard to stop. So I hope I haven't tried your patience. But it was wonderful. I hope that one day we will meet each other and continue this conversation. We will. Or I should put it this monologue.
That's Frederic Tuten. Today we talked about his books, My Young Life, a Memoir, and Tintin in the New World. We also talked about The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, Nightwood by Djuna Barnes, and Pedro Paramo by Juan Rulfo. Books of Your Life is produced by me, Elizabeth, with Melissa Yeager-Miller, and with help from Danny Fakis and Sybil Wallace. Production help from Argo Studios. Our theme was composed by Mia Schettino.